The fear subsided. The interest rate rose, the crackdowns, the whale manipulation, all but fight. We tried everything, taking the world by storm.
I am the storm.
Yeah, sure, whatever. It's time.
What's going on, guys? It's K-Dub here with another episode of CryptoZombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having an excellent weekend. Hope your weekend is better than mine right now. It's absolutely freezing out. It's 19 degrees. It is snowy. I need to get out of New York. Why am I still in New York? I should be in a tropical paradise right now, hanging out with those guys in Dubai or down in Florida or something like that. But nope, I'm just sitting here making more crypto videos for you guys because I freaking love you. But you know what? Speaking of the cold weather, there has been that fear of the crypto winter. In fact, if we have a look at what Bitcoin has been doing, we have been going on a non-stop downtrend for over 80 days, my friends. That is over 2 months of just straight downwards price action for Bitcoin. In fact, we are struggling to break above this critical resistance every single time that Bitcoin comes up to this level. We get rejected, and it appears as if we're trying to get rejected yet again right now. Now, I do know that we know that the weekends usually aren't really that important, right? You've seen crazy pumps completely erased come Monday and crazy dumps only to pump back up come Monday, right? So weekends can get a little bit crazy for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but I do have to ask the question and let me know what you think. Do you think that just maybe everyone is getting a little bit too bearish? Do you think that this could be signs that the bottom is actually close? Because everywhere you go, it's just doom and gloom and recession and markets falling and Bitcoin crashing and it's all going to zero. And it does make me wonder, oftentimes when everyone is saying we're going to go to 100,000 and there's massive euphoria and every coin is up 10 to 20x, that's usually a sign to maybe start taking some profits. And right now we are seeing virtually the exact opposite. We are seeing fear and greed at all-time highs as far as the fear part of the fear and greed index goes. So in today's video, I do want to discuss maybe potentially we are just getting a little bit too bearish. Could the bottom actually be closer than we perceive it to be? In fact, maybe all of this decline is essentially market participants just pricing in what they were expecting from the Fed, and maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Now, we're not going to jump to any conclusions just yet. Keep in mind, a lot of people are concerned about the interest rates. A lot of people are concerned about the Fed continuing to essentially taper. And yeah, we do have the Biden administration executive order on cryptocurrencies coming out potentially as soon as February. So what does this mean for Bitcoin? What does it mean for crypto? Well, watch today's video. We are going to focus on a lot of fundamentals. There are some things right now, some major developments that are happening in the cryptocurrency space that could be suggesting that this is the dip to be buying. But I guess time will tell for that. We will move on. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. You guys rock. I love you. You're awesome. If you're not subscribed, definitely consider it. And let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this video. Let's see what's happening right here. So obviously, guys, you could see we've been trapped in this downtrend. You know, you could say that it did somewhat look like a falling wedge pattern. At this point, I'm not even too concerned with the bottom of this. Sure, we do keep getting that support, but really the most important part is this resistance. I mean, you can clearly see every single time we come up to this level, we get rejected. We absolutely need to break out of this level. Now, obviously, Bitcoin could fall even lower. You know, we can come back down to that $30,000 level. I do believe once we do finally break out of this, this bear trend that we've been in, it's going to be absolutely astronomical. You can expect fireworks, not financial advice, but ultimately when you have a look at what happened here, essentially, guys, we were in this rising wedge. We have to go back in time a little bit, right? We're going to go back a little bit. And you could see that Bitcoin was in fact putting in higher highs and higher lows. So even though, yes, we have been in a downtrend for 80 days, technically this portion right here was part of the uptrend. So we've really only been in an official downtrend right here when we broke the 981 billion-dollar market cap and fell down to these levels. So really, it's only been this small area that has technically been the confirmation of the prolonged bear trend that has everyone freaked out. The things you can see right here clearly is that number one, we are still in this area where we could come back to, this bottom level right here. We've talked about this a lot on the channel. I do believe that what we are seeing is a consolidation. Yes, of course, people sold up here, but you have seen a lot of buying down here. You've even seen a lot of volume when we do come down to these levels, right here. And I guess you could argue we did see a little bit of volume right in this level, but looking a little bit lower, what you'll notice is the RSI is incredibly oversold. In fact, we haven't had the RSI this oversold for Bitcoin since we had the COVID crash. So this does beg the question, is it getting a little bit too bearish? I mean, you can see we did fill that CME futures gap, and we've been supported on both of these legacy uptrends dating all the way back to December of 2020. So ultimately, this long-term trend appears to still be intact, although short-term, we do appear to be in a bit of a pickle. But guys, hey, guess what? Dave Portnoy officially bought over $1 million worth of Bitcoin. He got 29 Bitcoin, so hallelujah, we are saved. Okay, no, but in all sincerity, I want to go over some things that Jurrien Timmer, now he's over at Fidelity. In fact, if you scroll to his profile, he is the director of global macro at Fidelity. I want to read a few tweets from him with some graphics, and he kind of goes into where he thinks we are right now. But do stick around after this because I have two video clips I want to show you. The first one explains why Bitcoin is most likely going to around $500,000 in the next 5 years. It also addresses the concerns over what the Biden administration may have in this executive order, and finally tackling inflation. Should we really be concerned, and is the Fed actually going to go through with it? Well, stick around for the second half of the video. You're going to love it. But first, what does Jurrien have to say? Well, I'm going to read this, but check these charts out. So he talks about Bitcoin often overshooting to the upside or the downside. Now, we know that this happens all the time, right? Bitcoin tends to pump harder than you think it's going to pump, right? It usually overshoots your expectations. And oftentimes, when it's down, it usually falls even harder than what you would expect it to do. Now, if we actually scroll down here and have a look, he says this is the Bitcoin relative to his demand model. It has overshot many times in the past, sometimes by a little, sometimes by a lot. But based on these fundamentals, the lower Bitcoin falls, the more undervalued it will become on a fundamental basis. He also mentions the Bitcoin to gold ratio is now back in the support zone and is 1.51 standard deviation. And he also points out this bullish divergence that we've been having. He says now that liquidity tide is going back out. The fundamentals should matter more than ever in 2022. And he also points out the fact that he thought 40K would have been the bottom based on the demand model. Although we are down at 35, he does think that at these levels, you usually tend to see some kind of a bounce or a recovery. Now, getting to the whole concept of why Bitcoin could be going to $500,000, $500,000 per coin in the next 5 years. And I showed you in my previous video, according to ARK Investments, how Bitcoin could easily hit $1 million. People say, no, that's crazy for Bitcoin to hit $1 million. Well, guess what, guys? When Bitcoin was $100, people never thought it would see 10,000. Then they never thought it would see 20,000. And the idea of Bitcoin even coming close to $70,000 would have been the silliest, craziest talk you could have ever imagined. And yet, that's exactly what we did last year. So this is Anthony Scaramucci. He's over at Skybridge Capital, and he went on to explain why he believes that Bitcoin will hit these levels. He says that it will be worth $500,000. It might take 4 to 5 years. The ride will be rocky, but it will certainly be worth it. When you look at it from a box-checking exercise about a store of value, Bitcoin hits more than gold does. But again, it's early, and so it's an early adoption story. It's going to come with volatility. He says, but I believe that when Bitcoin is mature, it will be more valuable than gold because of all of the technical properties associated with it. But making me think right now, IMF, right? The IMF's been coming out and they've been saying, hey, El Salvador, you probably should switch off of the Bitcoin standard. And we also have the Biden administration looking to release an executive order on crypto as early as February, which is literally right around the corner, just a few days, 2 days from now, February 1st. What could this possibly mean for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? Well, getting back to our good old buddy, Anthony Scaramucci, he was actually over on Kitco News, and he had this to say. It's a little bit of a longer clip, but I highly suggest you pay attention to what he has to say because I think the man makes some great points.
What would you say your outlook is on crypto regulation here in the US? Well, those two measures are actually bullish. So just imagine this nascent token, this nascent cryptocurrency 10 years ago with a very minute market cap, people laughing at it as being irrelevant. Now there's 1.5 or $1.7 trillion of total market capitalization of all cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin being the alpha predator of those, probably 40 to 45% of the overall market cap. And so it's now sizable enough where the IMF and the US government have to pay attention to it. So I'll predict three things. This will go way slower than Bitcoiners would like it to go. Number two, there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there that are libertarians. They want absolutely no regulation. Too bad on that. You're going to get some fairly stringent regulation. And number three, despite governmental attempts, whatever they may be, Bitcoin is with us to stay. The Chinese government is always saying they're banning Bitcoin or we're getting rid of Bitcoin, but they know Bitcoin exists in their culture and in the system. It can be stored on a USB and carried around in somebody's pocket. So it's not going away. I have taken the belief, and perhaps this is too optimistic, that Bitcoin will be okay in the United States because it already has been deemed as property by the IRS. And so the IRS treats Bitcoin as intangible property. I didn't learn many things in law school. I think one of the first things I learned, Michelle, was not to be a lawyer. That was an obvious thing I learned in law school. But secondarily, property rights in the United States, United Kingdom, places like Singapore are quite sacrosanct because they all tie back to British common law. And there's a 900-year legacy of legal precedent that protects property. And so the IRS has already said Bitcoin is property. It's going to be very, very tough for the United States, given that designation, to ban Bitcoin or to overly regulate Bitcoin. There would likely be administrative court relief because of it. So it's going to exist. Guys like Gary Gensler are super smart guys. Before they got into the regulatory rubric and are wearing a political hat, he was teaching a course on blockchain at MIT, and he was espousing the virtues of blockchain. And so I don't think he wants to cede the intellectual capital and all of the potential business opportunities and jobs that could come from the cryptocurrency industry to other countries. So my guess is that they'll come up with an answer here. And I'll say one last thing, because I think this is important. The progressives I cannot figure out because they don't like the big banks. They know that decentralized finance can help the underbanked. It's a long-term reduction in fees, and it's an empowerment movement for poor people, ultimately, if you really understand it. And yet they hate it. So they don't like the big banks and they hate Bitcoin. The only thing I can surmise is that they think that some people are getting rich on Bitcoin. And of course, we know socialists hate rich people and they hate seeing people get rich. So maybe that's the reason. But I think it's a big mistake. This is happening. And they're not going to be able to stop it. And just remember, the regulators wanted to stop Uber in the United States.
Yeah.
And people wanted Uber, and the regulators weren't able to stop it. Bitcoin currently has 47 million wallets. You've heard of a decentralized autonomous organization? Well, yeah. Bitcoin is a DLO. It's a decentralized lobbying organization. Don't forget that about Bitcoin. There's 46 million people that are political activists as it relates to that one political issue.
So it would certainly be in their favor to not ban it, but to regulate it and embrace it. Realistically, it's not going anywhere. You might as well get used to it. Figure out a way to tax it. Let's be honest. We know that's really all you guys care about anyway, up at the higher ups in the U.S. of the U.S. government. So ultimately, what is the deal right now? We're freaking out. We're panicking. Jerome Powell to the rescue. Inflation is going to come down. The U.S. is going to be saved, and everything's going to go back to before we were even on the gold standard. Well, is that a possibility, considering that we're actually off the gold standard right now and inflation's been running absolutely rampant and it's pretty much just been lie after lie after lie? Well, Natalie Brunell, who we all know is a major Bitcoin proponent, she was over on RT and she was discussing, well, actually it was a bit of a mini debate with our good old buddy Peter Schiff. Now, although Peter Schiff is not a Bitcoin believer, and I don't really like to give this man very much spotlight, considering, well, if you don't know Peter Schiff, he's essentially the poster child for support, investing in gold. And let's be honest, guys, gold, even though it's up like a few points of a percentage, really doesn't even come close to what Bitcoin has been able to provide over the past decade. But he did make a few good points in relation to the inflation issue and whether or not Powell can actually step up and make it happen. And I do want to play these clips for you because despite the fact that it's Peter Schiff, Peter Gold, excuse me guys, it's been a long week. I think it's worth seeing. And he does say a few negative things about Bitcoin in there, but we already know his opinion on that. And if you could just kind of sift through the BS, I think there's definitely a point to be made here.
The reason that gold has had some problems recently is because the market actually believes the Fed. They believe Powell when he says he's going to do whatever it takes to bring inflation back down to 2%. He's going to raise interest rates. He's going to start shrinking the balance sheet. And the markets are believing Powell, but I think he's just bluffing. And even if he follows through with the rate hikes he's promised, that's too little too late. It's not going to be nearly enough to slow down inflation, and so it's not going to restrain gold. The type of rate hikes that would be required and the type of balance sheet reduction that the Fed would have to engage in to actually get in front of the inflation curve and bring it back down is much too high for the bubble economy to bear. If Powell actually tried to fight inflation, he would destroy the bubble economy, the stock market would crash, we'd be in a massive recession, lots of unemployment, huge financial crisis, and we would force the government into insolvency. And once the markets come to terms with this reality, they're going to be buying gold. But I think right now, most people are not really worried about inflation. Again, they believe the Fed, so they think that the inflation problem is going to be solved. Once they realize that it's actually going to get worse, and once the Fed is ultimately forced to do an about face because Powell thinks that he can raise rates without hurting the economy or employment, he thinks we have this strong economy. We don't. We have a gigantic bubble, and even the smallest of pins is going to prick it. In fact, just talking about raising rates and this has already pricked the bubble. We're already pretty much in a bear market now. And so I think that sometime this year, whether it happens before the first rate hike or after, Powell's going to cave, and he's going to go back to bigger QE, and rates go back to zero. And that's when the markets are finally going to understand the predicament that we're in. I mean, they should understand it already, but for some reason they need a safe to drop on their head. And when that happens, then they're going to be looking for inflation hedges. They're going to look for a real store of value, and they're going to be buying gold. They may be buying silver as well. And I think they're going to be buying all sorts of real assets to get rid of dollars.
I think it's the number one thing that they're concerned about, because wherever they go, they see prices going up 40% at, the gas prices are going up at the grocery store, meat, their houses, rent is going up. And I think they're extremely concerned, and they don't own assets the way that the rich people do, right? So we've made a lot of billionaires richer through quantitative easing. And as Mr. Peter Schiff said, the quantitative easing is going to have to continue. And when it does, Bitcoin will go up just like it has for the last 10 years.
Not to mention the fact that, okay, so Peter Schiff, he's not a fan of Bitcoin, but I still believe what he's saying in regards to the Fed is pretty true. Come on, it's basically what they've been doing, promising one thing, doing another. They've been doing this for decades. Why would it change this time? And also, they can't even really technically do what they need to do, because the ramifications of them actually doing that would be detrimental to the overall fabric and stability of pretty much their whole situation right now, right? So check this out, guys. Let's end on some bullish news. The number of banks that provide crypto products and services is predicted to more than double by the end of 2022, according to a study published, according to this today, by the American Banker, featuring predictions from 153 senior banking executives from the regional and global financial institutions. They say 2 out of 10 financial advisors currently advise clients on crypto holdings, but that percent is expected to double by the end of 22. And if that's not big enough news for you guys, Pomp dropped this bomb. It appears that a bill has been put forward in Arizona to make Bitcoin legal tender within the state. Now, I have heard some interesting things about whether or not states can actually decide something to be made legal tender, even though the U.S. does allow individual states to have their own, laws and mandates and restrictions, etc. But I do think when it comes to legal tender, there may be a bit of a gray area there. But nevertheless, guys, the fact that this even exists, and it has been verified, by the way, by some of the politicians in Arizona. So this isn't like fake news. This is an absolutely real thing that's out right now. But man, you got to think to yourself, regardless of the outcome, this is incredible. I mean, can you imagine, for people that were around 2 years ago, I can because I was there, a state suggesting that Bitcoin even be adopted as some type of a legal currency? Absolutely insane, crazy times we're living in. If you're not bullish right now, then you are simply getting caught up in all of this price action. The end of the day, guys, what do? Could it get worse? Well, of course it can get worse. It can always get worse. But you know what, guys? It does get better. And we have seen, consistently over time what Bitcoin has continued to do. And yeah, essentially that's just up and to the right forever. So that being said, guys, I am your crypto guru. No, I'm not. I'm not a crypto guru. I don't even know why I said that. I am not a financial advisor. Don't listen to anything I say on this channel. I'm just a guy making videos in freezing cold New York right now. But I do love you, and you are the reason that I make these updates, because let's be honest, it's been somewhat boring times in a way. But you know what? If you can sift through all of that garbage, all of that FUD, you actually find that there's a lot more to be bullish about long term than there is to be bearish about short term, if that makes sense to you. So thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Be safe out there. Hope you have an awesome day. My name's K-Dub. This is CryptoZombie. And of course, if you haven't watched these videos, check them out right now. And until next time, stay crypto. And of course, most importantly, peace out.